listening to Chrysalis Colour, the podcast. Hello, this is Jorunn from Norway.
And Christine in Canada.
With a podcast about color analysis and how it applies to you in a practical way. We'll talk about how to use your colors to make your days brighter, your wardrobe more enjoyable, and your life easier.
We'll talk about topics that we find interesting, and we encourage you to submit your questions. A podcast listing is available at chrysaliscolor.com under the Podcasts tab.
Hi, and welcome to episode 31, an episode on hair dye. The idea came from, Jorunn, I saw in your FAQs on your website, your suggestion that clients be willing to discuss the color of hair dye they're choosing or consider not booking the appointment. I thought that was very forward thinking. And I have had many clients, draping models too, where the current dye is not their best choice. And both the woman and I know that she's got a long road ahead to get back to her own hair color. It's not so easy, you got to see yourself in a new way. And however much your logical mind agrees, well, it takes some time to come around to it. And then you got to decide what action to take. And then you got to do it. I mean, we're talking months, in the distant future. So I thought it was great that you would bring a prospective client's attention to that early on.
Yes, I do. I do bring it up because I think it's important that people are willing to at least consider it. Because if they're not willing to have an open mind coming to color analysis, then why spend all that money if you don't want to think about it? So that's it. And so this is our episode on how can we say that it's not about dyeing your hair to your season, because we have made several episodes about that, 12 to 17. Is that what I have on my notes here? And people interested in that can find them listed under the podcast tab at Chrysalis. And there's a link here for anyone listening elsewhere. So, but this, for everyone else, this is an episode about why not to color your hair. And maybe particularly for women over 40 or 45, it goes whether your hair is silver or if you don't want your natural color. So this is what it's about. So Christine, why shouldn't we dye our hair?
Because the odds of looking great are 50-50. And for sure, not better than if you're just wearing your natural color. And I would say the exact same for celebrities. Would you agree?
Yes. Well, I don't know much about the celebrities, but I think you're being too kind. I'd say the odds are worse than 50-50. But yes, I agree. It's really hair coloring, chemical hair coloring. It's really dicey.
Yeah, it really is. And, maybe more important, I think, very early in the process of starting to dye our hair, I believe I was 16 when I started with the sun-in spray, we lose the ability to see that we were better before, that it looked better to just wear our own color. We want so much to believe that the dye is going to fulfill all that we hoped it would, even though at 16, I really didn't know. I had no idea what I wanted it to do, but I guess I wanted something that we can't almost admit that it took us the other way. And, I hear a lot of women say, well, I just feel better with dye. And I think, well, I am glad to hear it because you do not look better.
I wonder where it comes from, this experience of feeling better with dye. And I'm not really sure that it comes from actually looking better. And if it makes you feel younger, I'm kind of convinced that it's kind of like fake news, because dyed hair, I don't know that it does make you look younger. It's not a given anyway.
It certainly is not. No, you look like you're trying to look younger. But that's a whole different thing.
Certainly, that's what you look like.
That's what you look like. And yeah, you might look younger for 5 or 10 years if you got the color just right when you started to silver. But after that, it's a bit of a losing battle. I think it has this chemical color, it has a frozen in time property, and the face just doesn't. It would be great if the dye froze the skin texture in time, but actually it tends to be hard on it, meaning that the face is looking older and older. So if you dyed your hair and got a facelift at the same time, maybe, but the two things are getting further and further out of sync as time goes by. So then the hair stays impossibly young because you're basically wearing you 10 years ago, but your face isn't doing that. And there's nothing wrong with your face. That's the whole point. It's the dye that's creating this disparity. And the reverse is true too. I think women who silver early have impossibly young looking faces. And plus, they're not in an ongoing struggle with themselves.
Yeah, and maybe that's part of it. Maybe this having a relaxed attitude, and you're somebody who accepts her silver hair, maybe that relaxed attitude does something to your appearance in a good way.
I think so. I think it looks relaxed is a term people have said about me. And there's something about self-acceptance that I think is very powerful. It is very hard to knock off center a person who knows and accepts and understands themselves. I mean, we've all seen the pictures of the 20-year-old with the hair to her waist. Well, great. Look around. Who looks like that? Or, you see this online all the time, this gorgeous waterfall of multicolored hair pictured from the back. Once again, where is this woman in your life? Is she in any checkout line? Is she at the hardware store? Is she at the where is this woman? Now, she's not in my life, but I will concede I'm not where the 20-year-olds are. And the younger women that do dye, they can look pretty good half the time if they stayed pretty close to their natural color plan and they don't have one big highlight on their whole head. I mean, they're trying things out. They look like they're friends. And dye, it's a lot less challenging to the young. I mean, it just is. And they have years where they can grow it out and see their own color again before the silver's there to stay.
True. And the young ones, they look cool with green hair or electric pink. Being young is a time to be crazy, and it becomes them, it's because you're playing, you can get away with looks, and their whole age group does it, they're trying out all the trends and looking like their tribe makes sense. And when I really get out my big guns and climb up on the soapboxes to advocate or rally for keeping your natural hair color is the time when you approach your middle and mature years. I mean, you spend the first years of your life, you're experimenting and you're growing a personality. And then when you're done with that, you have your personality and you're done with that painful experimenting. It's time to get real and time to get taken seriously.
Yeah, very, very much so. Over 35 or 40, trying things out, it's harder. It looks unsteady or unstable, different hair color all the time or whatever it might be. Like we're trying to live in our own past, but nothing else stops. The world keeps going. Fashion doesn't stop. And when you're 50, well, blonde hair doesn't really look 2020. It looks like 1980 something because our skin texture kept right on going. And, I'm not even talking about extreme blonde. Just normal blonde. Like you see it everywhere you go. This is the color you do see in every checkout line. Might be streaks, might be the whole head. And I think even the woman will often say, yeah, I like it for about a week. I get it done every 4 weeks. I get it done every 6 weeks. I like it for about a week. Man, that's not a good enough payback, I don't think. And well, we could divide women over 40 coloring the hair into two groups. There's those coloring silver with a color they chose to be near the original. And then there are those women adding actual color, like blonde or red, either the whole head or highlights. Would our thoughts be the same for both groups? Would you think, Jorunn? I'm thinking yes.
Yes, I'm thinking the same. Chemical color, it will be artificial no matter what, if it's meant to look like your real hair or bringing in something completely different. It's really hard to match to your hair. And frankly, if you think you look younger with dyed hair, you don't. You just don't. And silver hair, it doesn't automatically mean that you look ungroomed. Is that a word, ungroomed?
I think so.
Or
Unkempt or something.
unkempt,
maybe?
yes. Well, anyway, like you'd let yourself go.
Yeah.
But a hairstyle or not, that makes the difference. And hair products. But I'll say it again. A hairstyle is much more rejuvenating than hair dye.
1000% agree.
Oh, yes, but we get it. And women have to conform to a lot more standards, appearance-wise, than men, don't we? I feel that's the case anyway. But other than in like on television or in the entertainment industry, a lot of women of power, they don't dye their hair.
No, and it takes them back if they do.
Mm.
I often meet women who don't want to show gray or silver hair, but they would acknowledge that other women look great silver, like Jorunn, for example, but they couldn't do it. What's that? I mean, do they believe this, that their version of silver isn't as good? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I've thought about that too. And I often wonder, because I meet women who, I don't know, they seem a little embarrassed that they don't want to have gray hair because they look at me and I have my silver hair, and they say things like, oh, I don't want my hair to look gray. I don't want my gray to show, but you look great. I wouldn't look good in my kind of gray. So I don't know if they are embarrassed to tell me that they don't really think I look good, or that they are worried that their version of silver isn't as good as it should be, which is absolute hogwash.
It is. I don't know what that's about. And I wonder if one asked them very politely, if they would even know. Sometimes I find that they are holding on to a belief that hasn't been true for a long time. One that comes to mind is I speak to younger people, or I work with younger people, and they wouldn't take me seriously. And I think, oh yeah, they would. That's experience and wisdom and all those things. They're not there when you're 22. But I think the person who might not take you seriously is you. It seems like a kind of apology, but I never quite know for what. Maybe not having the courage to wear their silver, not feeling sure that they're fine the way they are. Anyhow, somehow they've convinced themselves they look better with chemical color. Jorunn does have amazing silver hair. Jorunn also has a perfect hairstyle, but anyone in their own colors wearing the right makeup with a great hairstyle has gorgeous silver hair. That's automatic. It never doesn't work that way. In fact, it's the dye is usually the thing that clashes and holds women back, A, from seeing themselves, and B, looking as good as they can in their beautiful colors in clothes and makeup. An exaggeration, Jorunn, or would you agree?
No. You said it. The dye is the thing that is off, that makes you look off. And we know in the analysis situation, when that gray scarf that we put on everybody, when that goes on and then they look better, we know the hair color wasn't good. It's just like a sign of that, or style, or both. And when you see that edge of the natural hair color under the scarf, and that's beautiful, gorgeous color, and it matches makeup and drapes and eyebrows. Yeah.
And you just know what's coming. I often will take off the scarf actually right in the middle of the luxury drapes, because it's not me who has to see the conflict between the dye and the woman, and the dye and the clothing. It's the woman who has to see it. And when we're all on board, we see this beautiful harmony happening. She's saying, I didn't know my eyes could look like that. And that's when I take off the scarf, and she sees the issue immediately. Now, I do think, though, that hair color should be the last thing to fix, because you're going to make different decisions. You're going to make better hair color decisions if you fix the clothes and the makeup first. So I kind of like this moment, because, she has my full respect and sympathy, but you got to get to the place where you're ready to wake up from your dream world, that nobody wants hair that's obviously artificial looking. Nobody wants eyebrows that make no sense. And man, we saw so much beautiful hair come out during the pandemic. I think it was a relief for everybody. It was certainly a relief for me. Like, thank goodness something got rid of that dye. And the woman, well, it's hard because she can see the original problem. She can look in her photographs. She can see she did not look better when she was dyeing her hair, and she looks better now. And yet some are still looking for what could they possibly dye their hair. Oh gosh. I mean, I figure out just dye it blue. What does it matter? It's so discouraging to have gotten to this place of easy, confident beauty, and then to choose to go back. Mm-hmm. And then friends, one of my favorite topics, I've heard friends say, never change your hair color. It is so perfect. Oh, get real here. Is the face going to stay the same? Are the opportunities and the jobs and the responsibilities, is that all going to stay frozen in time? And women don't really have a shield for this kind of advice. I think you got to be made of Teflon in the modern world. And hey, we're all more vulnerable about appearance than that. I get it. You take things to heart that should never have been, that you had no way of knowing. But so what Dumbledore said to Harry Potter, it takes more courage to stand up to your friends than your enemies. 10 points to Gryffindor. He was right. Do not just swallow what they say. Have an honest conversation with yourself and have a selfie diary. I'm a huge believer in that because you can see it plain as day. You become more independent of all the feedback, well-meaning or not. And it's really a way to access the power of truth in your appearance. So here's a question. Do you think that dyed hair ever looks sexier? Like a sign, I'm still in the game. After the fertility years are done, is it a sign of youth? Is it a sign of physical health? Because I wonder if our reasoning around dye changes. When I started with the highlights at 20, did them for another 25 years, not my favorite thing about myself. Best I can get back into my head at that age, I think I was just looking for change because I had no criteria whatsoever for picking a color. I just did blonde because everybody did blonde. I had no information about which colors to avoid, which is a big part of looking better. And for sure, I had no criteria for looking at myself after and deciding better or worse. You could have shown me the two photographs. This was you a week ago. This is you. I wouldn't have known which was better. And it didn't enter my mind to try to know it. What do you think? Does dyed hair look sexier?
Sexier and still in the game?
Yeah.
I can understand where it comes from. But consider this. Everybody accepts that when you're in your mature years, you should adjust your dress code. I mean, you shouldn't dress young. You need to avoid looking silly in those teenage girl clothes. And what's that expression? Mutton dressed as lamb? That's negative. Everybody thinks that's negative. Everybody accepts it. Nobody ever questions that. So put that thinking into hair color. Why should we cling to hair color like we cling to that? We should, I hate to think of it, to cling to the short skirt and the fluffy fake fur cropped 80s style jacket. That would look silly. Everybody agrees on that. But there's something about hair color. People don't see the connection there.
Yeah, for some reason, 25-year-old hair color, 35-year-old hair color, it doesn't quite ring true when you're 45, 50.
Oh, it's the same thing as with clothes. We should dress our age and we should hair our age.
Yeah.
Anyway, and men of power, they have great hair, bare bellies, gray hair, and they make no apologies for it. They don't.
No, they really don't. I mean, is there a man alive who dyes his hair to gain power? There might be, but it's not working for them. And for the most part, no, of course not. They do not change their hair. And why? Because it has the opposite effect and they know it. I mean, yeah, okay, it's less socially accepted for men to dye their hair. And by power, I don't necessarily mean how they influence the external world. I mean more that turned inwards impression of being in control of your life, settled, someone other people can trust. And dye hair, it just interrupts that. Different hair all the time. It's this ongoing tug of war with yourself. I would be less likely to hire the man or the woman. And sort of the same as, is there a man alive who shows skin to gain power? No. Why not? Because it has the opposite effect and they know it. Jorunn, I notice you've added a new tagline to your newsletters that says something along the lines of, let's forget beautiful, let's do competent. Well, I agree so much, but I'm wondering where that came from. I've always wanted to ask you. It caught my attention because when someone asks me about a new person I'm thinking of hiring, I often find myself saying, yeah, I met them. Nice, normal, sensible, reasonable. That's what I'd want said about me because it conveys trust, as opposed to, yeah, nice, kind of forced looking hair, though something just seems less solid. And I had 3 words that came up in one of the YouTube videos: forced, fake, and fussy. It's outdated. You don't want to look like that. Like you don't trust yourself. Why would I trust you? But enough about my long talking here. Where were you going with that new tagline?
Yes, well, where was I going? When I think back, it was in one of my philosophical moods, I guess, after thinking about how fleeting beauty is and how unimportant in the world it is, relatively speaking. I mean, looking beautiful is nice, but looking competent is what lands you that job. And that's what makes people hire you. And when we dress to look competent, it does something to us. It's kind of different than dressing to look beautiful. It's about the mindset. And I'm thinking, let's see how we can create a look that says, I'm competent. And what would that look like? Yeah, what would that look like? What would that be different from creating a look that says I'm beautiful? Could be different answers depending on who you ask, of course, but I think it's a very interesting question to ask yourself. And yeah, well, is that an answer you can relate to?
Yes, because as you speak, I'm thinking about, are they kind of mutually exclusive? Can you is beautiful or competent? No, that's not true at all. You absolutely can be both. I think you are. And I hope that on, sorry?
Yeah, what do you focus on?
Yes. Yeah, I do think artificial effects that are not beautiful, if they kind of take you outside reality too much, if they take the viewer outside the real and the possible and things that speak on your behalf, saying things that are not true about you. So it's what you say is, which woman am I most likely to listen to? Sorry to say, it's just not the one with the dye, or not always the one with the dye. I have nothing against dye, to be clear about that. And I don't think Jorunn does either. If it's the right color used the right way. And that's the problem.
That is the problem. And can we just say one more time that dye rarely looks better because it seldom does?
Because it's the wrong color or the wrong application, do you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yep. Like you see lots of CEOs and politicians, do they look better? Does having dyed hair give them more power? No. I see their credibility comes from somewhere else. And the hair dye is something you kind of have to try to ignore or pretend it's not there. A reader, Leah, recently left a comment on one of my YouTube videos. I'll put a link at the bottom that represents so well what a growing community of women is realizing. Leah said, the right colors make a woman look empowered, and that is not something I was trained by the media to see. I needed someone to show me the difference in front of the mirror for it to click. I think there's a mental shift for at least some of us in owning our colors.
What a great quote. She means colors in clothing and makeup, I assume.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be anything? Wouldn't it be hair as well, though?
I don't know. Maybe not hair dye. We're saying, in some context, we've been saying here that chemical color rarely looks good, and the right colors makes me look empowered. And your natural hair looks fine, and you look empowered. But we're not making a case against dye. I'm not saying that. In any season and any age group, dye can be flattering. Once you grow into your personality, like I said earlier, and you want to channel your real self, it's much harder to fight with yourself with chemicals that everyone sees. So anyway, it's my very personal opinion that once your hair silvers, dye is rarely better, or maybe never. Do you agree, Christine?
Yep, agree. I absolutely agree. And I don't matter if you're 25 or 65. The silver is not as bad as you're telling yourself. And ideas that silver looks older, it's the idea that's outdated and needs to be brought into the modern world. It's not your hair. I mean, I could see it maybe for 10 years. Like, let's say the woman's 35 to 45 and she wants to cover early grays, but don't choose a solid head of one color. That's not particularly helpful. I think it's that honest conversation with herself about when it's time to stop dye. That is what's being postponed way too long.
Well, that's kind of my story. I used to color my hair all kinds of shades, from black brown to red brown, and I tried to stay kind of near the natural. And then when I discovered so much more gray showing in the roots and temples, it just didn't feel natural anymore. And it got to be a hassle to keep coloring it, to cover it. Mm-hmm. And I was maybe 35, 40 by the time I made that change.
You have, I've said many, many times, probably one of the best, most beautiful heads of silver hair I've ever seen. But did it take you time to get comfortable with it?
Yes, because it happened gradually. I didn't turn this silver overnight. It just turned out suddenly there were more and more silver strands by the temples, and there was like a little bit of a more gray in the, how do you say it, this in the part.
Yeah.
So, and then I stopped dyeing my hair, and I didn't use permanent dye. I used the dye that kind of washed out over time, and then and I stopped, and then there was a little bit of gray here and there, and then it gradually changed after I stopped.
Did you ever think of going back to dye?
I think it would, at this point, it would look silly if I did.
Oh, it would.
It would feel like me. It's like, this is me now.
Sure.
And yeah.
I mean, I'm just wondering, about those women who say, you did it, but I could never do that. I'm wondering if you also went through a stage of, am I making the right choice here? Because I know that you get a ton of compliments, and rightly so, about your hair, but probably in the beginning, you didn't get all that support, and you may have had some second thoughts.
That's true. But I must say, my hairdresser was a great support.
Nice.
I had this streak right in the front of my hair that turned silver before the rest. It didn't turn all same shade of silver at one time. And she looked at it and she says, this looks really beautiful. I don't think I could dye it any hair that, you could never recreate this with hair dye. So she was like, she supported me, and more than that, she encouraged me to keep it.
Nice. I think that streak, when the bangs start to go silver, first of all, I think it looks beautiful and artistic on everybody. And that's a sign for me of stop dyeing your hair, because it's one of the first places that you see grow out. And boy, it's hard to manage. And the rest of the head might not need to be dyed, but you got this commitment right there front and center. Yeah. And it's a tough one to manage, and it just looks so good when it's left on its own. I was the same. I colored mine to get rid of 20 years of blonde. So I would have been in my late 40s. And I finally settled on this medium brown, but I could see that every time I did it, it looked a little more artificial, looked a little more like a wig. I didn't even have a lot of gray, and it still looked totally fake. It wasn't a bad color, but it was too concentrated. It was too saturated. I stopped about 6 years ago, I guess, in my mid-50s. But I've seen women, what you said before about when you put on the scarf and you see that little rim of beautiful hair, you think, what are you doing? Some of them, sometimes they'll have like copper sand or this soft rose gold growing out of their head. And for some reason, they feel compelled to turn it yellow. Like generic yellow you see everywhere you go. And I'm not just talking about cheerleader blonde yellow. Like I see summers with auburn, rusty hair. There's this tendency to overshoot, too bright, too warm, too something. Another one, when Korean or Asian women who have naturally black hair put blonde in it, oh my gosh, because now they don't look so good in white. And previously white was a magic color for them. So now, you get this woman who's looking at months of correction and waiting and spending.
Yeah. I'm kind of mesmerized by the sound of your voice here.
Oh.
And I'm thinking, does anyone over 40 look better with dyed hair?
Well, I could not say better. I could say not worse. Say, for example, a light blonde, light summer, who's bleaching a few strands, not her whole head. A bright winter who bleaches the odd strand and doesn't get a yellow stain. An autumn puts in some coppery balayage, ombre, like in the bottom half. Don't put it up near your eyes or your face at a good darkness level. I never, ever see a solid head of dye as better, or very rarely. Although I could think about a winter, she colors her hair back to a brunette, and she's still fairly young enough to manage the saturation of the color. And that can be great for quite a while. But then comes the moment for the honest talk, where your hair kind of looks like a wig, or it looks like a wig 3 weeks out of the 6. And all the colorist has to do is stop coloring a few strands, then a few more, and then a few more. It's just not that hard. And then transitions in the future get easier and easier.
Yes. Well, I like what you said about the balayage and the not a solid color,
more subtle.
Yes, and it's I had a True Spring client. She bleached her hair, and it was in these kind of sunny, warm streaks, and her eyes were kind of blue aqua, and it looked okay. I've seen worse, and that's just about as good as it gets. It's like, sorry, hairdressers.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull examples out of my mind here. Dye, they dye it too dark, and now regrowth is obvious, because a tricky one is when hair is silver, but the natural color was medium dark or dark. Well, now the regrowth is really obvious, and you can't really foil out sections and have dark brown and white together. But then the wind blows, or you see it at the temples, as you said. So it's hard to find a place of compromise, but, wear it back, cut it as short as you can, wait it out. And hopefully, like your stylist, you have someone who can give you some ideas.
I think it's a sign here, Christine. We've met so many clients and so many people, and we're having trouble coming up with examples of how chemical hair color could look better than natural hair when we reach the mature years. And so maybe it's the wrong question. I think the right question is, what can they do to look better? How can we support you in not keeping up the dyeing of your hair?
Yeah, without coming out and saying coloring your hair like Cameron Diaz will not make you look like Cameron Diaz. But the first thing, I think it might be telling the truth. I say to clients, and I know I'm very direct, but you don't hire me to take care of your feelings, right? You don't hire your therapist, your mechanic, or your doctor to do that. And part of it, I think, is we got to manage our expectations of other people. They don't know, your friends, your family, all of these people. They don't know, they can't know, and they don't want to say, I'm really not sure about that hair, or I don't remember. So all it comes out as is, well, I love your hair. That doesn't help you. You can't seriously expect your friends and your coworkers or your husband to sign up for this kind of friction, because the next question is, well, what do you mean? Why didn't you tell me? You got to pay for that kind of help. And you'd have to wonder about their powers of self-preservation. Who's going to step up and say, yeah, that color you've been putting in your hair for 15 years, it's time to stop. Would you, if someone told you that, would you accept it without challenging them?
I know.
I mean, how the conversation would go. And I personally think colorists could and should say something. They still have your business, helping you make transitions, get back to your own hair color. I mean, that's why I love you as a friend, Jorunn, is because you don't let me go around with bad choices. You what you say, you're not talking about me. You're just talking about this color. And I don't take it personally, but you tell me straight up. That's why you and I are one of the reasons we're such good friends. But I never hear hair colorists saying this. Maybe they feel like, well, I better not say that because I'm the one who's been putting this color in her hair for a decade. Now you should be making another choice. But I'm sure there's a way to do it. I mean, we do it all the time with our clients, right? You could pick another lipstick. You could pick you don't ever wear that color again. And in Norway, well, you've mentioned with your hairstylist, what's the tradition with hairstylists and color advice in Norway?
Well, yeah, like I said, it depends on the hairdressers, because I've had hairdressers who colored my hair happily, and but a really good hairdresser will support you, but you have to guide them. You have to tell them what you want. If you let them come up with suggestions, it's probably always going to involve some sort of chemical hair color, because let's be honest, that's what they earn the most money on. And I'm kind of feeling a little bad for coming out and saying this. Yes, but we color analysts are not popular with the clothing shops because we empower them to buy less clothes and be happier with what they buy. So then they don't shop that often. And now we're going to be trolled by angry hairstylists. Maybe.
And boutique owners.
Yes, they're forming a line outside now. I can hear them clawing on my door. Anyway, but as color analysts, we have an obligation to be honest and to give the clients straight talk. It's like, here's like 5 different colors you can use instead of black and in clothing. And there's like so many other things you can do with your hair, except if not dyeing it.
I agree. And I do think it's the professional's job to give people choices and to acknowledge the limitations of what they can know and do know. And why can nobody ever say, I don't know, they waffle around and it's the way it is. So you have to do it that way. Like that just
you can't expect friends and family to take that role.
You cannot know. I mean, as color analysts, sure, we need to respect your feelings, but we are not here to soothe them by giving you this comfortable place to hide from reality for a few more years. You got other friends for that.
They can do that.
They can do that. Come to think, my friends don't. They do not tell me what they think I want to hear, or we didn't stay friends for long. I guess we choose what we want in a friend, because I do meet friends folks whose friends support their every choice, like a sort of gesture of solidarity and sparing feelings. And I don't see that as support. I see that as leaving me in my happy self-deception, which makes me weak. Don't leave me there. And it makes the friend weak because there's this self-deception on their end that they're supporting me. I mean, there's no wrong or right. I guess we live with the good and bad of our choices, but friends don't let friends go years with a poor choice of hair colors, even though the truth is the hardest thing to speak. Am I being harsh, Jorunn?
Yes, but
Someone
Someone has to say it.
Yeah.
It's time, Christine. It's time that we address this issue. And it is a lot easier for a professional to say it than your near and dear ones. So
Oh, yeah, someone has to say it so that eventually people start stepping out of the woodwork and saying, I agree. I agree. Then eventually we all think it's not such a radical idea and we knew it all along. But this expectation, I mean, I got some things to say about hair color, as you can tell. There's expectation that your colorist would know your best hair color. How? By looking at what? Because you got blue eyes? Lots of people got blue eyes. They sure would not wear the same best hair color because they've been doing it for a long time. I've heard that one. This is how I've had foundation match. They look at me and they say, well, I've been doing this a long time. Oh my goodness, this is just too big an ask. And I think we got to manage ourselves in this because these industries are not in a hurry to manage themselves. Why would they? I mean, they can't sell dye and bleach and wrong foundation fast enough. They try. I know they try, but I do believe that they're well-meaning for the most part. I mean, everybody's got a balance sheet. I do get that, but I come back to, if you don't know how you know, then you don't know. So ask them how they know, take on some of this responsibility. I've asked stylists over the years what they learn about hair color. And I hear, yeah, we had an hour in school. Or, yeah, they taught us about warm and cool. My stylist today, I love the guy. He said, yeah, we had an hour in school. None of it made any sense to me. Finally, people like my stylist and Leah step up and say what's true, what's really going on. So good. Now we can pull it into the light and we can fix it. So when your hair silvers, it goes to a neutral color in your own season palette. You don't jump to some other group of natural coloring. Why would you? You've got plenty of versions of gray in your own. Your biology doesn't mutate or something just because your hair turns silver. It's just a different version of you. Might go from a darker neutral to a light neutral, even yellow and red. It depends a bit on what you define as a neutral. And some people, it can be corn or carrot, but it's almost usually mixed together with true neutrals or browns, and depends on the person. So to keep the overall energy up, because color adds energy, if it comes out of your hair, well, you got to add it somewhere else. As simple as that.
Yeah. And that other place is clothes and makeup. So we add more of our season's colors in clothes and makeup, and that compensates for the blander version of our hair. And what's hard here? Well, it is hard to buy clothes in your colors. It's really hard. We know that because we shop too. And the last thing clothing makers or shops want is educated or discerning consumers. They just want to move the product off the shelves fast.
Yep, it is a priority for them. They know they've got more inventory coming in the back door and stuff's got to go at the front door. So anyway, go shopping for your colors. Don't just shop for your neutrals in your palette. Start shopping for your colors and put your hair money and time budget into clothes. I mean, I see women who stop dyeing and they change nothing else when, to be honest, the closet and the hairstyle could have used some upgrading before. And then they feel disappointed. They don't see the effect they wanted and they blame it on the silver. No, if you could sit in a salon chair for 3 hours a month to get color put into your hair, well, then put that time into other types of color choices.
Right. And about makeup, that is really not hard. You can go to Christine's shop and get your palette, your beautiful makeup that's harmonized with your season. And just make sure you don't buy makeup from another season. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. And put the time that you spent in salons into learning other things, simple things, like eyebrows.
Huge.
I think eyebrows are super important. And if you can apply a colored line to a piece of paper, you can put it on your face. And when your eyebrows are silvering, you just pick a brow color that is close to the color that the brows used to be.
Yep. Eyebrows, huge. A lip gloss or a lip color.
Yeah, lip
and
color.
just something that looks natural on your face. Might be terracotta versions for autumns, might be watermelons for springs, whatever your season version of a natural looking lip. Okay, sure, you might have to apply it a few times a day, but do it when you look in the mirror a few times a day.
Yeah. And women tell themselves that dyeing their hair is a substitute for makeup, and it's really not. Actually, when you have chemical hair dye, it's usually just a little off. So then you have to compensate with makeup. And when you're young and lucky enough to have your unaltered color before it turns to silver, that's the time in your life when you can skip makeup. So, Christine, are we saying that when hair silvers, we have to wear makeup?
I think so. It definitely looks better, 100%. I mean, everybody chooses their preferences and their lifestyles and their occasions, totally. But it does look better. You cannot get what it does without actually using it. It's you just look more alive. When the color goes from one place, like the hair, put it back in another place. That's all it is. Just don't use hair dye to do that. You might think this is simple, but you're not saving time, you're not saving money, and you don't look better. So why bother? When you have natural silver hair, you do need blush and lipstick, especially women who feel pale or are pale or can be very evenly colored. I mean, they can be a bright season, but everything is evenly bright, and the effect can be with that quiet, sort of evenly colored winter skin. They can think they look pale. Could be a summer too, not restricted to any particular season. Olive skin tones, for example, very common for those women to feel they look pale.
Yes, I can relate to that. I miss the contrast of my dark brown hair. And I do, sometimes I wake up in the morning and I look in the mirror and I feel I look bland. But it's so easy to fix. I put a little cream blush on to my cheeks and lips, and then that's all it takes. I feel like I look awake and fresh and healthy. And so if I had to choose just one thing, it would have to be lipstick. Lipstick, and I could use it on my lips and on my cheeks.
Yep. If I had one thing, it would be eyebrows.
Ah, yes, eyebrows.
That's the one thing. People say I look more healthy, I look more relaxed, all sorts of compliments. And all I did was fill in the two ends of my eyebrows.
Yes, the outer edges. Otherwise, they look like tadpoles.
Yeah. Well, the middle, the inside corner and the outside corner, and I just clean up the line. That's all it is.
Yes. So we do two things: brows and lips, and so two things, and that's three. And then you don't do anything the rest of the day except a swipe of lipstick. It's so easy.
It's so easy. And by lipstick, really, we're talking about a semi-sheer kind of color that's very, very natural on your face.
So my pet peeve is that we put all this chemical stuff in the hair, and then the hair looks like dry and brittle, like dry straw. And then you need to compensate. You have to use all those kinds of hair products. And then they go to health supplement, their health stores, and then they spend another $200 or whatever on health food.
There is a point there, and I get it. I mean, everybody is doing good things for the environment in some ways, and we can all acknowledge we're also doing other things we shouldn't be doing. But this business of washing these chemicals down the drain over and over again, I kind of think there should be a chemical dump fee, But also, this woman is then going off to meditation or buying her essential oils, and I don't know, somehow these two stories don't quite jive.
Right. Well, I think hair care makes a big difference. And think of all the money you can save. You save money on the chemical hair dye. You can buy really, really good shampoo for that.
Yep.
And you can pay a lot of money on getting a current haircut. And that look like you live in the modern world, and stop the chemical wear and tear on the hair. And then instead improve the texture and the gloss. Healthy, glossy hair, it looks fresh and groomed. It does. And yes, the environment, there's no point in being a vegan if you, well, never mind. Let's not, I'll get down off my soapbox now. But there are colorists who have to stop working as hairstylists, because their exposure to the chemicals is making them sick.
Yes, I think that it's definitely a concern. And as we know more about it, maybe over time, it will become more of one. Who can say? But yeah, I agree with what you said about living in the modern world, that often dyed hair, it looks like 10 years ago. There is something about it that can be a little bit outdated. And whether you're putting in color or whether you're bleaching, it does kind of roughen the texture of the hair. Sometimes it's glossy and nice. I have seen that. It can improve the volume and the gloss. But gosh, it's another one of those honest conversations. If the hair looks dry and brittle, it needs to be conditioned. It's just much better. Jorunn, we started talking in this episode about the note on your website about not booking a color analysis unless the woman is willing to discuss hair dye or her choice of color, or why put the money into the color analysis. Now, I agree. It is so hard to come to the end and see an improvement, but it's not what it could have been because the dye gets in the way. The client's pleased, but my feeling is, oh gosh, if you only could have seen yourself. Well, okay. I mean, at least we found you a beautiful lipstick.
At least we found a lipstick. Well, but it's not that we don't want to color analyze people if they have dye, but the season can help you come to terms with your natural hair color. And there's no better way to manage that transition than with the season's colors. It's more like, I want you to keep an open mind and be open to discussing some options when you see the alternatives. And I think our clients are lucky to come for a color analysis and to be able to see the full effect of what can be. And I think that might sow a little seed that makes them go home and think and readjust. And like you said earlier, I want to emphasize that again. Hair color is the last thing you change. First, you change your clothes, the colors and the makeup. And then when you're ready, you'll come to term with your hair color.
Yes, you do have to be patient with yourself. I do think that having your natural hair color is the single biggest thing that you can do in your own favor to get the full benefit of your colors. Or maybe I could say the other way, having chemical color is the single biggest obstacle to really maximizing the potential of what your colors could be doing for you. And even women with natural hair color, sure, sometimes they can go home and it can be 3 or 4 or 5 months later, they've changed their clothes and their makeup, and then finally they see that their natural hair is beautiful and perfect. So either way, it can take time. It's just, it's not just hair dye that takes away our credibility, though. There's this thing of you just got to walk your own talk. You can't talk to other people about living in the moment when you clearly don't. And some of the choices we make just don't work in our favor. And it's not just women with unnatural hair color, men too, right? What about men with too much cologne? It's another form of sensory overwhelm that moves the needle away from credibility. You're not as anxious for that man to ask you out, to be your boss, because it's kind of taken over your sense of smell, I guess. You know what else is odd to me? There could be a huge industry around helping women go back to their natural hair. I mean, huge, right? As simple as foils to selectively color less and less hair. I've never asked a colorist if this would be easy or hard to do, and it'd be different for each woman. Okay, fine. But there's got to be a way to solve this besides continuously putting chemicals into the hair. And for the colorist and the business, it would be a more modern way of being on a woman's team that still gets you the business. You still got women coming out the door, but you really are empowering them.
This is true. So thank you, everybody who listened, for joining us and bearing with us while we're on our soapbox with our opinionated opinions about letting your hair silver naturally. And Christine and I will be back with another episode. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.